The US and Iran are reportedly closing in on a deal to end the war. News outlet Axios says both sides are nearing an agreement on a one-page memo, with Washington expecting a response from Tehran in the next 48 hours. US President Donald Trump threatening to resume strikes at a higher intensity if Tehran doesn't agree to the deal. The 14-point agreement will have Iran commit to a moratorium on nuclear enrichment in return for the US lifting sanctions and releasing billions in frozen Iranian funds. Both sides must also lift restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz. US officials cited in the report said progress in these talks prompted Mr. Trump to pause his day-old Project Freedom mission that aimed to escort commercial ships out of the waterway. Only 3 vessels made it through the strait since the operation began on Monday. Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy says it'll ensure safe transit if the US ends its threats and with new procedures in place. In the latest incident, a French shipping firm says one of its vessels was attacked yesterday, resulting in injuries and damage to its ship. Earlier, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Washington achieved its objectives in its military campaign against Iran. That's despite failing to secure Tehran's enriched uranium. He says combat operations against Iran, dubbed Operation Epic Fury, have concluded. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump has rejected suggestions that China is challenging the White House over Iran, highlighting his, I quote, very good relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Iran is set to be on the agenda when the two leaders meet next week in Beijing. Nick Harper is tracking this story for CNA, and he joins us live from Washington, D.C. Nick, what more can you tell us about this one-page memo to end the war?
Well, Angela, we're told that this one-page Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, contains 14 points that negotiators have coalesced around over recent weeks. We're told that the US, behind the scenes, has been pushing hard on negotiations, led by Steve Witkoff, the peace envoy, and the US President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Now, they have been negotiating indirectly with Iranian officials. Now, included within this memo, we're told there are several points, including Iran agreeing to stopping nuclear enrichment, possibly for a period of 12 to 15 years. Iran also agreeing to never obtain a nuclear weapon. And in return, the US would provide sanctions release to Iran by lifting multiple sanctions that are in place against the country, and also releasing billions of frozen Iranian funds. On top of that, both sides would gradually work to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But really, the next 48 hours, we're told, are key to all of this, because the US is hoping that Iran will respond during that period. And if both sides agree to this memo, that would then start a 30-day period of formal negotiations. The plan is that they're then working towards a more formalized agreement. This memo would act as the framework for that full agreement. But despite all of this progress, or at least seeming progress, Donald Trump now has waded in with, once again, another threatening social media post in the last few minutes, posting on social media that if Iran doesn't agree to this new memo, the bombing starts and will be sadly at a much higher level and intensity than it was before. So a usual tactic there from the US president, presenting an option to Iran and coming out with very threatening language on social media.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Secretary Rubio is declaring that combat operations are over in Iran. Is he jumping the gun here, given that a peace deal is still nowhere in sight?
Well, there seems to be a couple of things at play here. Potentially, the US is signaling to Iran that it will not attack. Therefore, it is negotiating in good faith. And if there's no chance of attack, then perhaps Iran is more willing to come to the table. But of course, the US maintains that leverage in the region. It's kept its military assets, its navy there in position, and it has strengthened its assets and its positions in the region as well. But also on top of that, a Vietnam-era law means that the president can only wage war for 60 days without approval from Congress. And that deadline, the 60 days, came up last week. And that's when we saw the White House formally notifying lawmakers that the conflict had terminated, meaning that no authorization was needed. So I think that's part of the reason we saw the Secretary of State there doubling down on that assertion that military action against Iran was now, in his words, over.
Nick, thank you so much for bringing us the latest. That was Nick Harper for CNA, live in Washington, D.C.